Hi there, my name's Jane Anderson and this is the Jane Anderson Brand You Show. It's the podcast for experts who want to have greater impact, influence and income for their businesses and careers. As experts, we know that people buy from people and work with people who they know, who they like and who they trust. So I'm so glad you're here because it's that time again now to really amplify how you show up in the world. Hi there and welcome to today's podcast. I'm so thrilled you are here and being able to share with you our very special guest on the Jane Anderson Show. In this session or in this podcast, in this episode, we interview a super special guest who we've worked with for some time. She's been really open in being able to help share with you her journey and to be able to give you some tips and advice on if you're thinking about growing your practice as a consultant, some of the strategies that you might be able to implement. If you are in the consulting space, whether you're, we have a program that's called Women with Influence, which is where a lot of women who are consultants that work with us, but I do work with people who are not just women. So you're most welcome to reach out, jump on the Jane Anderson website, subscribe, become part of the tribe in the community where you'll be able to hear about some of the latest podcasts that are coming up. You'll also hear about events that are coming up as well. So we like to keep you in the loop so that you can come along and I can work with you and help you to be able to answer some of your questions, perhaps about building your own practice. But with that in mind, I'm going to share with you a little bit about our guest before we interview her today. So our very special guest today is a lady called Alena Bennett. So she is a chartered accountant by trade and she worked with an international public practice. She's got an incredible amount of corporate experience. She's a published author and she spent the last 20 years working with as a finance professional, particularly in Australia and the US. And she came from a background of being that technical sort of space. But what she realized was that she has actually really had the best skills in being able to communicate and connect and lead and influence and persuade people, which was really around that leadership space. So despite coming from that finance background, she really had those skills and she went on to hone them. She works specifically in the space of leaders in finance. She's done a bit of work in the space of women in finance, but particularly now works with CFOs. She's created an incredible program called the CFO Boardroom, where she works with CFOs to help connect them, help them. She's also written a great book on being able to become a CFO of the future. So she's really helping them to really create resilience in their careers, to be able to define opportunities, to help them create more influence and impact in their roles. Most people work with Alena to help them to break down silos in their teams, rather than being seen as a back office function, to be able to really step up and become more visible, have more influence. Things like sometimes they don't have things in place like succession plans and being able to, or to really become high performing, or even to help them to identify their next career opportunity. I've asked Alena to come on today to share with her some of her really unique experience around being able to build something like a signature program, which is what she has built. She runs programs and workshops. She speaks at conferences and all those types of things, and she does work with high-performing teams. But in particular, I've asked her to talk about how she's built this incredible program and the problems she solves. Some of the people that she works with include like KPMG, BDO, EY, Rural Co, Invacare, Infomedia, Xero, Latitude Financial, TAL. She's worked with some of the biggest brands and she really totally gets her customer. I'm really excited to bring Alena on board today in the podcast, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. I would love to hear what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear your insights. Please reach out afterwards. I'd love to hear. And even perhaps if you want to suggest a guest for me, I'd love to hear that as well. So hi there, Alena. Welcome and thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I am so grateful that you are here and to be able to have this opportunity to interview you, particularly for our audience. We have lots of people, particularly women, who have their own practices and thinking about either sort of starting their practice, or they've been in a similar situation to yourself where you've had your practice for some time and then going into, or you've maybe contracting, then going to your own practice, things like that. So I'm thrilled that you're here. I have so many questions to ask you. I'd love to have you all day, but I'm trying to make the most of the time I've got with you. So Alena, are you happy to share a bit about your practice and your background and how you kind of started your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is a finance professional, senior finance leader by trade. So I was an accountant and an auditor for a very long time in Australia and in the US. And over that time, I was definitely not the sharpest tool in the shed, but what I loved doing was helping people, right? So what I found is during that time, people were coming to ask me for help. And what I saw in both landscapes was the positive and negative impact that leadership had on performance, and in particular team performance. When I was an auditor, we had lots of different teams. And so so fast forward a little bit, come back to Australia. I had done a lot of training in the US and I brought that over. I'd also specialized in sampling. So I was a sampling specialist, so doing lots of advisory type engagement with engagement teams. And when I came back, I moved into their technical advisory department in KPMG's technical advisory department. I then had my 2 children and went, you know what, partnership's never really been a thing for me. So moved into corporate. I didn't want to sort of be pigeonholed as an auditor, I suppose. And it was during that shift, it was at that shift of moving into corporate where I started to put language around things like performance and culture and leadership. They would ask me, I'll never forget in my job interview, they said to me, oh, look, one of the things we need to do is we need to roll out an internal controls framework. And my heart sank because rolling out internal controls was not what I wanted to do, right? Okay. But I very quickly and nimbly, and, you know, for sort of one of my smarter moments, I suppose, I went, yeah, totally fine to do that. But in order to do that successfully and embed that internal controls framework, we need to have the culture to support it. So given the growth trajectory of the company, I'm going to need to do some work on the finance culture. Thankfully, they said, have at it. So I think that was my sort of first proactive foray into doing the work that I do now with finance leadership teams. But it was really a couple of years later when I was sitting on a business leadership team. So I was the finance executive in one of the lines of business. And I was in a leadership strategy day. And I was sitting there and I had that moment. I was such a little girl. I went, that's what I want to do when I grow up.
Oh.
At the facilitator. Right. I was like, that's it. I don't know what that is, but that's what I want to do when I grow up. And I vividly remember the next day or a couple of days later, because that was down in Melbourne, saying to my friend in the bathroom, her name is Anna, I said, Anna, I think I've seen what I want to do when I grow up. I was in my mid-30s, right? So I wasn't a young spring chicken. And, you know, as a lot of us do, or sort of as we do in those situations, we ask them for a coffee and we ask to pick their brain, right? How many people have had that happen to us? And, you know, he was very gracious with his time. I had no idea that this world that we play in, Jane, existed. Right. I was just in my I just do finance. I just, you know, beaver away and I, you know, climb up the ranks. I had no idea that coaching, facilitating, training, speaking, didn't know it was a thing.
Wow.
And so it was like this, my eyes were just opening because, of course, you know, I caught up with him a few times, then he connected me with other people. Right. And I really found like, I felt like I'd found my purpose, that this was the thing I was meant to do, because I knew all the technical stuff. I didn't love it, but I could do it. And as I said, I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed technically, but I was very good at relationships and influence. And so that was what contributed to my success. And so I got to a point where I went, you know what? My energy and effort is best placed partnering alongside those finance professionals, those really smart ones that actually need to amplify their results or elevate their results with the leadership skills, with the team leadership skills and all of the rest of it. So that was really how I got to where I got to, where I am now. But I suppose the thing, I'm a little bit of a high initiator. So when I have an idea, I just go and do it. As you know, like any attribute like that, it's good until it's not. And so the good part of it, I suppose, at the same time, you know, the stars aligned, and I was working with another consultant on a project internally, and he said to me, Alena, we've got this project that I would love some support on, not in the finance space, but I'd love for, you know, to sort of come. He knew about my sort of new aspirations, and he said, well, how about you come and work with me on this project? And I thought, oh gosh, you know, it seems like a big leap, but at the same time, it's a soft landing, because as you can appreciate, as you know, as an accountant, we have lots of qualifications, and so there's a bit of the, am I qualified to do this going on?
Right.
He was giving me that sort of soft landing. So I went, I'll take the opportunity, I'll just jump. Which was absolutely, you know, I'd never change it. But I suppose in terms of lessons learned, I'd probably do a few things differently, but we might come to that. And so I jumped in, and I did that contract work for about a year. Right. And what was nice about that, it took me away from the finance world. It actually was with some frontline staff. But over the course of that year, I sort of rekindled with that distance, it sort of rekindled my passion. And I realized, you know what, I can really help these finance professionals. I know their lingo, I've done their job. You know, I think that's where my value is best placed.
Yes.
And so I decided after the 12 months in that particular contract role, I decided to sort of start my practice in the, you know, baby version of what it is today.
Yes.
And I started doing all the things. And, you know, as someone who suffers from shiny toy syndrome, I literally did all of the things.
Everything. Right.
And doing all of them poorly. Right. I dare say that the delivery was good. Because, you know, when you get up and you have to perform on stage or coach or what have you, that's the real sort of, that's the bread and butter. That's the stuff, that the capability that you go, yeah, I've got that stuff. But as we know, or as we learn to know, delivery is just one piece of the pie.
Yes. Yeah, all that infrastructure around it to make that happen. Yeah,
exactly right.
Right.
So I suppose, so that was all good. But I'd certainly had lots of peaks and troughs in those first few initial years of, it was the shiny toy thing, and you know, it was the, oh, I'll go and try that, or I'll go and try that, or I'll go and try that. And whilst I sort of knew that the playground I wanted to play in was the finance bit, if I'm perfectly honest, I was a little bit like what I hear a lot of people are in that early stages. You kind of go, well, I actually just need to sustain my business, so I'll kind of cast the net far and wide.
Right, yes.
And whilst I was hearing a lot of, you've got a niche because it'll make it better, there's that, I think, that scarcity part of the brain that goes, oh, but if I cut off that.
Yes.
And
what about all these other people, and what am I missing out on, yeah?
And I'm sure I can help them because I'm wonderful, right?
Spot on.
However, so what happened, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, what happened over a number of years, I suppose, you know, the runway, I burned the runway down, the revenue wasn't quite replacing itself, and I was kind of asking myself I was faced with some difficult decisions or circumstances. I suppose the additional piece of context is I'm the breadwinner in my family. Yeah. It always has been that way, and that works really well for us. But obviously the dynamic was starting to shift, and that was causing some uncertainty. We had two very young girls, my husband and I, and so that it was just sort of providing a bit of a rocky platform. Anyway, so if I think about my husband's, Cody's American, as you know, and so he follows American football. So it was a little bit of a Hail Mary, you know, a Hail Mary pass. Can we get the touchdown? I wrote my first book. I went, you know what, this niching thing has got to be a thing. So I'm just going to write a book for women in finance.
Right.
There was a little bit of the, you know what, Alena, you've been in your business for a few years. You probably should have a book anyway. So there was a little bit of the, you actually should have done this anyway. But if I'm perfectly honest with you, Jane, it was a little bit of a Hail Mary. Let's do this niche thing. Let's see if it works. Let's write the book and see what happens on the other side.
Okay.
It was a game changer in a number of areas, not particularly on a revenue side, because the release was right before the pandemic, which meant that all of the gender stuff sort of fell off the radar for a little bit.
Yes.
But there was something about holding a book and going, oh, I did this. Not everybody can do this.
Yeah.
There's actually substance.
Yes.
In this. And so you know, like they say, you've got to sell yourself before you can sell anyone else. But there was a bit of both going, oh, I've written a book and gosh, there's actually lots of good stuff in here. I knew it was good because I'd been teaching it for years. But then there was the other people going, oh, you've written a book. That's incredible. Can you come and have a conversation with me here? Can you come and talk to my team there? So that started to, I suppose that gave me enough impetus or motivation to go, all right, you know what, there's something in this. I think at that point, Jane, there was also you know what, I really want to be in this game. Like there was that decision bit where I go, I really want to be in this game, but I understand that I need a bit more runway. I need to buy some time because it's not fun playing in survival mode. It doesn't do anything from a delivery perspective. You know, when you're in sales meetings, you know, it comes out of your pores, right?
Screaming desperation. Yeah.
And as you know, I am a bit of I'm not real woo-woo, but I do sort of believe in the power of the universe. And I was skimming my emails, and there was an email from the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand, which I'm a member of because I'm a dorky accountant. And I just kind of flicked through, flicked through, got to the bottom, and it said, you know, career, like the career section. And I went, that's interesting. Clicked on that. And as it turned out, there was a part-time role in an area that I was had particular expertise in.
Right.
And I was pretty certain that a former colleague of mine at KPMG ran that team.
Oh.
So I went, this is interesting. So I emailed her separately because the things that are going on in my head are, you know, I want to make sure I've got that runway, but at the same time, I don't want to do anything that's going to undermine my brand that I've been working hard on. And so I reached out to her and I said, hey, we'll call her Anna. I said, hey, Anna, just wanted to check. I saw this thing. I saw you might be looking for a part-time role and I might know someone who's interested. Is that the team that you lead? And she said, oh, yeah, actually it is. And I said, okay, can we, you know, let's catch up for coffee and let's talk about it. So I caught up with her in town. I said, actually, the person that might be interested in is me. And I said, and this was very honest, I said, quite frankly, I'm lonely. Like I'm someone that I thrive when I'm working with people around a team. And whilst I had this level of confidence that I was on the right track, I really was progressing in a sort of linear, proper fashion, grown-up fashion. I kind of felt like that energy was missing, that mojo was missing.
Right.
And so I said, look, this is what's going on. And I'm in the process, and they knew, like I was in the process of building my business. My business is focused on finance professionals. And at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm around good people and I'm working around good people.
Yes.
She said to me, Alena, like this is far below your pay grade. So she was sort of thinking like career thing. And I said, Anna, this has got nothing to do with that. Like I'm not on a career trajectory. I just want something that's going to work alongside my business.
Right.
So very fortunately, I got that role. It was a 12-month contract role. It was 2 to 3 days a week, I forget.
Okay.
It was perfect because I obviously didn't know the pandemic was going to happen. So it meant that in the midst of pandemic and lockdown, I had a team that I was working with who were wonderful. I had some certainty of cash flow, which meant that kind of kept the foundation layer going, which meant I could keep growing my business.
Yeah.
It was during that time, Jane, so I've been stalking you for a long time, but it was during that time.
You'd be surprised how many people say that, actually. I have been stalking you.
But you put on a couple of offers that I couldn't refuse, and I just felt that everything was leading to this point. And so I think I attended one of your Content Club bootcamp things. I signed up for Content Club, and then I'll never forget that you did an end of financial year sale for cut through collaterals. Yep. And you know, at that time I was going, oh, this is such a good deal, but cash flow, you know, but you made it super easy for me to make that decision. But it was a bit of a hold on to your hats, people, this is it. And it was like within, I can't even remember, but it was the game changer. Like if I think about the trajectory of my business, right, that was the game changer. Right. And in preparation for this conversation, we've sort of had this conversation before in terms of what was the thing, like what was the game changer? Yeah. I think I connect to your story. Like I think about way back in the days, I remember watching a video on thought leaders and I went, yeah, like I resonate with you from a human perspective. Yeah. So that's, as you know, that's important. But it was the rigor and the discipline that you provided around that program and that framework. Right. I'm not a hustler. So I'm not someone who just goes, all right, here's, you know, I can't sell ice to Eskimos, to use that saying. And maybe this is the sort of accountant in me, but I want to know that it's good. Yes. Like I get the idea of sell it and then build it after. I understand that, but I really struggle with that. In your heart. Correct. So for those who are listening, just to share, if that's okay, Alena, for those who are listening, at that time, so was in COVID, because that was the time when we realized, I was like, well, the one thing that most people are missing, if we've got any opportunity to do anything now, if people are in lockdown and going, how do I make the most of this? And I know you think like that, and a lot of women in our community think like that, is how can I make the most of this time? What can I do? And so the program we had then was Cut Through Collateral, which is essentially, okay, let's build the collateral, landing pages, white papers, brochures, all the stuff that people go, I never have time to do this. But at the same time is I'm struggling to get my sales, and I'm struggling to get my price point up, or I'm struggling to articulate my value. So you got in, and I think there were 14 modules in that program, and you just went hell for leather. Like you were like, yep, right, I'm in. And it was, I think you did every single piece. You just followed it to the letter, I think. Yeah, I think, yes, I did. And I think I had a heap of skin in the game. Yeah. I think I knew I was starting to see what good could be for me. Yes. And I suppose one of the things I will say about the sort of accepting the contract role, that it was the right time to do that. And what I mean by that, I reckon if I had thought about it and accepted it 12 months earlier, I may have looked at it through a lens of failure. Right. Whereas I had I reckon the book probably had a lot to do with it. Yes. Is that I was able to go, no, this is a strategic play. Right. This will give me the foundation. So it'll give me the energy and it'll give me the certainty of cash flow, which will take away all of the potential negative energy that sometimes gets in your being when you're kind of not where you want to be. Right. And how did you manage the energy of that, Alena? Because I think this is really key, because there's a lot of women who start their practices, and I was like you. I was contracting before I went full-time in your practice, and there's a lot of pressure that comes with that, but it's great because you've got the certainty of income, but you're having to manage your energy to continue to do the things that are going to progress your practice. How did you push through that time, trying to go 3 days a week here, and then being able to keep going, okay, I've got to progress that, because I'm sure on those other days, it's like, oh, I think I'll just have a break, or I need work-life balance. It's hard to push through that time. What did you have to do to get through that, to make that transition? Yeah. It's a really good question, because it is hard, because it's almost like you're pretty much doing, well, your business is a full-time job. And so really the contract sits on top of that, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I'm all about intention and purpose. Yeah. So I knew specifically the point of that contract role. It was there. It was there for a real purpose. It was there. I was being very intentional about doing it.
Okay.
And intentional about the energy that I give to it. Now, as a lot of, I'm sure, women in your community, and certainly the ones that I know, we're all high performers. We want to do the best in everything that we do.
Yes.
Right? So it meant that I actually had to manage my energy in the contract role. I needed to do a great job, of course.
Yes.
But I needed to, if I ordinarily would have gone there and asked to do more, I had to really temper my own expectations.
Okay.
Because I knew that anything extra that I would give them would actually be something that I take away from my business. And so I just had that, okay, this is, and particularly, working with people that I loved, and I did and still do love the people that I was working in that team with. I'm so grateful for their friendship. And we are still friends, but I just had to, really manage my energy, and I was really transparent with them as well.
Right.
So I didn't pretend that this was something that was agnostic to my business. They knew it sat alongside each other. I was very transparent in the interview process. In fact, they were really interested. I'll never forget the interview. They said, if you've got such a successful business, why would you want to be getting a job? And so again, it kind of came back to my own conviction around the why I was doing the contract role. And so when it came to, and I know certainly sort of towards the end of that year, Jane, I was going, Jane, I don't know how long I can do this.
I know, I remember.
Because as a result of the work that we'd been doing, my business just kind of went straight up.
Yeah, you were just hanging on.
Yeah. And it just, so that was the thing. It was, I'm doing this for a reason. I was very, even I had Cody on board with I know this is going to be a really tough year, but this is what it needs to look like on the other side. If we can just hang on for the year.
Yeah.
And I
what was that tipping point, Alena? Like what made you decide to finally go, okay, it's time to start my practice 100%? That takes a lot of guts and courage. What happened that made you get to that point?
Probably time and fatigue, if I'm really well, no. So the contract, the contract itself,
the contract was coming to an end. Okay.
However, I was pretty good at what I did there. So they kept asking me to extend.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And so I did on my terms. So instead of going, I was effectively on an employment contract where it was a part-time employment contract. So I went, I will extend, because I was scared to let go, right? Like there was just this certainty that the money was just going to keep coming in and I could just keep doing what I wanted. Yeah. But I said, okay, well, yes, I'm happy to extend, but I'm going to work on these discrete things, and it's going to be an invoice type arrangement.
Right.
So I didn't ever carry that guilt with me that I'm supposed to be on the clock, but I'm not. I obsess about my calendar, and so I know that if it's in my calendar, I'll get it done. So I was pretty confident that if I entered into the agreement, into this extension in this way, I'd be able to honour my agreement with them without jeopardising anything in my business. However, that volatility or that the variability didn't work so much for me, and it didn't work so much for them. And so actually until recently, in fact, just recently, we actually have severed, because I've got to a point where I said, you know what, my, day rate, the value of my time, the value of my IP, it's actually changed so much that if you want me to contribute to this curriculum that you're building, we're actually going to have to either license IP or figure out, another way to do it. And they actually have come back to me and said, we don't enter into those arrangements. So we actually just recently, that conversation was probably about a month ago. Right. Their timelines were too tight given what delivery I had booked in anyway. But actually, it was about a month ago where we had that, I was able to have that conversation, say, yes, I'm happy to work with you, and I understand why you want my expertise in there. Yes. But this is the arrangement under which we will have to do that. And they said, no, we don't do that. So that's all good.
What I love about that, Alena, is like, if we listen to the journey you've been on, is the evolution of your practice. And I know it sounds so obvious, but I don't know if you find this, but I find sometimes when I'm talking to those in our community, and even for myself, I was like, but this was the decision I made. So I've got to kind of stay with doing this. But as you evolve and as your practice evolves, because you're unpacking your thinking, you're now articulating your value, is that those conversations, yes, you made a commitment with them, but that was for that period of time. And as it evolved and changed, you worked with them to have those conversations, as opposed to beating yourself up, racked with guilt, trying to, work around it, as opposed to just being transparent and working with them and having the conversation and just going, well, someone in our community says, yeah, I've learned that I'm never to sit still. This is continuing to evolve it and change it, as opposed to going, well, okay, I'm sitting here, I'm going to stay here for the next 10 years. So, I think that's such a valuable insight for you to share, is that, even though you may have, yes, that was right for that time, but it's okay. You can give yourself permission to grow and to be able to progress. And so, Alena, you now in your own practice, if we go forward to the start of particularly the really fabulous program that you've got now, are you happy to share a little bit about the community that you've built now and how it works and how it all came about?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to. So I think there's my sort of signature program and community that I've developed over the course of the last 12 months is the CFO boardroom. So for chief financial officers that are looking to play bigger, essentially. This is something, Jane, that we started talking about this time last year. And so, yes, I had niched into the women in finance, and yes, the sort of gender diversity thing had sort of come off, and you and I were having a conversation. All right, so what's the next thing? Like, who do you really want to work with? And I said, you know what? I want to work with CFOs because they're the ones, they're at the top of the tree. They're the ones that can have the most impact and influence, not only with their teams, but at the leadership and organisation level. So that's the group. And I said, the other thing that I would love is a group of people around me. I mentioned the contract part was a lot around working with great people. Well, that's a lot of what the CFO boardroom was around. So I said, I want to have that signature program that people know, Alena does this and she runs a community for CFOs, because I'm not someone who necessarily needs to be in the spotlight. So we talk about the different modes that we operate in. Yes, I work across all of the modes, but my favorite mode is the coaching and facilitating mode, where I get to bring people together and be the connector and help them and elevate them together. Right. And so the CFO boardroom was something that we sort of planned out this time last year, and we said, okay, well, what does that look like? And so I've been spending the last 12 months very actively building my list of CFOs and building that community. And so now I have the CFO boardroom, which is my high performance coaching program, and what I call my platinum community.
Yes.
For CFOs. I have a community called CFOs Connect, which is a group, it's a bigger group of CFOs that comes together on a semi-regular basis just to catch up. It's kind of like CFO Boardroom Light.
Right.
If you want. And I suppose my hope is that's been really successful this year, sort of taking those things off. My big goal for next year, I suppose, is to take those communities across the whole of the Eastern Seaboard. We're obviously limited a little bit in travel by COVID and travel restrictions. So I'm really hoping to extend that out, because what I've found is that CFOs and finance professionals very good at internal networks, and I was the same. Very good at internally in the business, who is my profile, who's my profile with whom, am I influencing the right people? But we sort of get the blinkers on, and even though we know we should get out there, we don't want the go to a mass conference and do the speed dating type thing.
Right.
It's not my style either. And so it's really, what I keep hearing, the success of these communities and the people in these communities is it's just an opportunity to kind of get together in a safe and genuine environment and just kind of go, this is me.
Yes.
This is me. It was fascinating. We had a boardroom session last week.
Yes.
And one of the guys that joined our cohort for the first time for December, really very serious. Like, you think I'm intentional, Jane? This guy takes it next level.
Really?
Yeah. So he wanted to be, super, and he's got a plan for his 5-year career. Wonderful.
Okay.
He got in and we were creating our play, which is our sort of 90-day focus project. And, it can either be a business outcome, a professional outcome, or some sort of personal activation outcome thingy.
Okay.
I fully expected, given his intention and his, the conversations and sessions we'd had so far, his would definitely be about business or professional. And he said, actually, I've got 3 streams in my life: cricket, family, and work.
Right.
I want to get some balance in those 3 things because it's too work focused.
Right.
And it was just such a good reminder that, what do I do? I bring the smartest minds, the smartest financial minds together. That is my day job, right? But fundamentally, I'm dealing with a bunch of human beings with complex lives that want to be good. They want to be there for their friends, their families, their loved ones, which is something that really just binds us all, really.
Yes. And they're human beings at the end of the day, aren't they? Yeah. And Alena, are you happy to share just even a bit on the mechanics of how something like this works? Like, because there's people will be listening to this going, how on earth do you pull together a CFO boardroom? Like, got list and all that sort of stuff. But one is, what kind of, I don't know if you're happy to share, but kind of how much people pay for something that. And, so you talked about a quarterly day. Are you happy to share a bit about the mechanics of it?
Absolutely. So I'll go back and maybe just go a step before the launch. So I want to be really clear, if it's okay to share with you, and hopefully I don't do something wrong for myself, but I started this time last year, I had 64 CFOs in my list.
Right.
64. Yeah, 64.
Right.
I now have about 800.
Yeah, great.
In 12 months. Now, because I have 2, because I separate my leaders in finance portal into CFOs and aspiring CFOs, right? So there's a whole nother chunk. But for CFO, I don't know what percentage growth that is, but in terms of how do you even get yourself in a position where you can host multiple community events and forums for CFOs?
Right.
You've got to do the work to get the list up and get those numbers up, because otherwise it's impossible. Now, I'm still a long way away from having big public programs and taking on the world, which is ultimately what I want. But you've got to do the work. And again, it sort of comes down to what I've learned from you, Jane, is just that rigor and discipline.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things, it is easy to be bright-eyed and excited about the world that we play in because it's fun. Like, we are so lucky to do what we do.
Yeah.
But it is a job.
Yeah.
And the job, you need to have that consistency to have that growth. So the list is a really big part of that. So I just wanted to share that to start with.
And a big part of that maybe is, because I know you've made a real commitment to your systems with your team, because you came out of being on your own. You now have 2 team members. You have someone full-time offshore and you have someone local working with you about 20 hours a week. You really invested in your systems, because I know you obsess around productivity, your calendar and cadence and rhythms. And so I think what you're kind of talking about is it doesn't look sexy, because you're just going, it's just list. You just got to keep finding those people and but you can't do that if you haven't got those systems and rhythms in place. Yeah, I know you've put a real effort into those with yourself and in particular your team to get that system working so you can stay in your genius. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll never forget the cut through collateral session where you went, CRM is not so much about your CRM, but how your CRM interacts with your PMS or whatever it's, PMS.
Project management system. Yeah.
And I said, Jane, what's a PMS?
What's all that?
And so then and so now Asana is my best friend. Thanks to you and implementing that with the team. Yeah, so there's a lot of back end work, but I fundamentally believe that if we can get the foundations right, like I kind of go, if you get your foundations right, that is the source of freedom.
Yeah.
Or if you get your structure right, that is how you can be spontaneous.
Yes.
Right. So not everyone likes to be, you know, kind of play in that spontaneous, fun space.
Yeah.
That's totally cool. We'll let them hang out in the foundation and the structure space.
Yes.
But if we are going to grow these nice big businesses and serve our communities, we need to have the foundation. So yes, it's not sexy, but it's an absolute must.
Gotta have it.
Then we worked together to build this. I knew I wanted a signature program. I knew I wanted a community, and I wanted to remove any sort of feeling of a work client relationship feeling transactional, which is why the community piece was so important, and also the longevity of a program was. And so the CFO boardroom is fundamentally a 12-month. It's the first 12 months of a program or a career journey, which is really designed to help CFOs. Let me backtrack just quickly. The role of a CFO is evolving. It's growing. The pandemic actually was a really good thing for CFOs because it really put them in the spotlight as a role that can add value, that can not only keep companies safe, but you really can drive the strategic direction of a business. So the pandemic, I think, worked wonders for CFOs and the profile of a CFO. So really the CFO boardroom is to harness those CFOs who are up for that. Not all of them are. That's totally fine. But for those who are up for that journey, who are looking to lead their businesses, looking to be the 2IC for their CEO, looking to, you know, it sounds big, but really looking to change the world, do good things, and collectively change the communities that they operate in. That's who I'm looking to for support. And so the CFO boardroom provides them with the opportunity to go, all right, what is my brand as a CFO? And, you know, it's a really interesting, as I've been really playing in this space for the last 12 months, really interesting the conversations I'm having around, well, what's next? You know, they've worked up the corporate hierarchy. So you look at the CFO and you go, well, what else is next? There's really only one role. And I think there is a school of thought that it has, you know, CEO is the next step. I disagree with that. I think those are two different roles with different capabilities. And you need to have a desire to be a CEO. It's not an easy role. So, well, the conversation what I'm trying to do in terms of helping CFOs create their brand is say, well, you know, forget about a job title. What does your career look like for you? What, you know, I say play for significance. Significance not about status, is about legacy. Right. So what is the impact you want to have on the world through the work that you do? So it might be through CEO, or it might be a board, you know, a board role, or it might be, you might step into the philanthropic space. You might decide to be a virtual CFO and help multiple companies instead of just one. I think there are just so many exciting options for the future for CFOs. And so that's why we do a lot of work on brand and positioning. And I know I'm talking to the absolute master in that space, but I find that when we talk about things like confidence and conviction, once you've got a brand that's aligned in purpose, that conviction, that gravitas that everybody is searching for, it just sort of exudes naturally.
And Alena, with this group, so it's a group of like 12 that you have in a group, and 8, was it?
It's 10 at the moment.
10?
Yeah.
And so they're 10 people. So you have a group of 10 that get together, and you're looking at doing some other groups as well. They get together each quarter, and they get some coaching as well. Is that how it works?
That's it. So if we talk about there's a quarterly mastermind day. So those are what I call the pillars of the program. Full day quarterly masterminds. In between the quarters, we have a 2-hour check-in where we get together and go, are you on track? You know, where do you need help? What do you need support with? You know, it's really to say, it's a little bit like when you go on a road trip and, you know, when you're on the big motorways and you start to go and you hear that, you're kind of at the end of the lane. That's what that mid-quarter check-in is, to go, all right, let's get back into the middle of the lane, get focused and accelerate through the rest of the quarter.
Right.
We also have that, yeah, so then there's one-on-one coaching sessions through the course of that as well. So making sure that I can help the CFOs on their specific focus areas, which will be different for every CFO and whatever their specific goals are.
Right.
And then we're also, one of the sort of evolutions, or a couple of the evolutions that we made as a result of the lockdown, was we're now running an annual CFO of the Future community event,
right.
Which will bring all of my CFOs and my aspiring CFOs together.
Nice.
For an annual event, which will be amazing. And then there's just some other sort of webinars and insights across the course of the 12 months. So it's certainly, it's not for the faint-hearted, but it is for those who are high achievers looking to continue to, elevate, push themselves, and really looking to, move out of the back office and be seen as a real value creator for the business.
You're solving a great, like, this is a significant problem for them. Like, if I think about, we talk about, trying to increase your value proposition, how to increase your day rates, how to, create programs. And I don't think it's always about necessarily, how do I sell my big ticket item? But it's not about that. It's like, what you talk about significance, and I think about, well, what's the most significant problem that's going to hold them back from being able to do that? What do you need to design? And then working out, okay, so what's the problem? Here's the solution that it would need. And I know you've spent so much time, I know how intentional you are. If for anyone that's listening to this, if you could spend 5 minutes with Alena to just see how deeply she thinks about these problems and challenges, but not just problems and challenges, opportunities, and how thorough you are in thinking through what will progress these people. You've got a huge sense of advocacy about you when you're working with this. And, big part of it is obviously you come with a lot of context and credibility, and that empathy that you have and deep insight into that you were then able to evolve it into, okay, so now that I realize, here's the focus, here's the challenge, here's the problem, here's the opportunity. Okay, what do I need to design to solve that? And as a result, you went, if I could design anything, it would be this thing. It'd be called a CFO boardroom. It would be, and you were so clear. So as a result of that, like, just to get an idea for those who are listening, particularly on, could I do something like that? Like, what do they normally, what kind of price point do people pay for something like this, Alena?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a $20,000 program plus GST, or that's the excluding GST price. One of the things that's really served us well, CFOs are a funny bunch. So not all of them, there is the assumption that they would be being, very senior in the organization, they might have their business sponsored the program. But that's not always the case. Sometimes these CFOs just understand the benefit this will have on them personally. Right. And so we kind of cut that $20,000 in whichever way is most useful or easy for them. One of the two of the, I suppose, big values, I suppose, that you role model, Jane, really well, that I really seek to apply in my business, are the two values of generosity and ease. And, so those are the two things that I say, well, you know what, if you're in, I'm just going to figure out how we can make it work for you. I don't want the cash to be the issue or to be a pain point for you. Let's just, how do we make it easy? And so if they do opt in, being a 12-month program, if we don't have a program currently launching and they want to opt in a few months early, we go, great. We'll spread that 20 grand over a longer period. I'll give you some free coaching sessions along the way so you can get a running start to the program. Yeah. And we just make it really easy because, again, I don't want transactional relationships with these people. Yes. I want to know who they are. I want to give them the best result they can. Yes. And so it's just about, how do I make it easy and how do I give them a solution that's going to help them?
I love that. And Alena, I'm keen to check in on, like, you've applied so much stuff, whether it's systems, whether it's marketing, list building, like, you've thrown everything at it. You've brought on a team, and you've brought on 2 team members in the last 12 months. Like, you've invested heavily. If someone's listening to this and they're thinking, I was Alena I'm in that contracting role, I'm starting my practice, they're seeing themselves in you where you were 12 months ago. What would you suggest to them, or what do you wish that you had done differently, or what do you think was the most significant thing that has made this created, because your practice has absolutely transformed in the last 12 months. What advice would you have for someone who might be listening to this if they are saying, that's Elena's me, that's me?
Okay, what would I do? I think I'd be really, so there's a few things, just be really clear with what you want.
Yeah.
This is what I typically find, and I find this with my clients as well, and this certainly was the case for me, was I sort of knew what I want, but I sort of didn't. Right. And as I said, when I first stepped into this world, I had no idea what it meant. And so I think I tried a lot of things, and I allowed myself to be influenced by people that perhaps weren't the right people to be influenced by. I think there is a bit of a chicken and egg situation in there. Would I be if I didn't have that and all the rest of it? But I think what I would say is be really clear. I think it's a self-awareness piece.
Right.
And be really self-aware of what works for you, because you'll get so much advice. Yeah. I had lunch with some of my high school girlfriends a couple of weekends ago. And they were talking, I don't even know what they were talking about that, but they were bouncing around a silly business idea, and they went, well, Alena, maybe as the entrepreneur of the group, maybe you can do this. And I just thought, gosh, it's just it's a weird world that we play in, and people will just offer you really random and nonsensical advice. So if you know what you want, and if you know what works for you, it just allows you to say, thanks very much, but that's not really for me.
Right.
I think the other thing is, and I've talked with you about this, I do suffer from comparisonitis at times. Yeah. And also more recently a bit of imposter syndrome. And so that comparisonitis one is, what are you about? Not everyone is going to want to serve CFOs. And in fact, people will always say, one of my CFOs the other night said to me, Alena, why do you just focus on CFOs? Like, surely you could work, with others. Yes. And I also know that's not the right thing for my business, because my mentors tell me otherwise, right? I also know that will dilute the value that I can offer to CFOs. But from a comparisonitis perspective, it's just coming back and going, this is me. There is only one of me. Yeah. People are going to like me, and people are not going to like me. And you know what? That's okay. I don't actually need to be all things to all people. I am the oldest child, and I'm a people pleaser, which I'm sure many, many, many people watching this will resonate with, right? We want to help everyone. Yeah. But it actually doesn't help anyone if you just try and be all things to all people. So, really staying in your lane and just being comfortable that there are going to be people that are ahead of the game than you, that are doing different things that look more fun and sexy than you. But play your own game, and you'll be right. As I said, I'm suffering from a bit of imposter syndrome at the moment. That will come, because you'll go, oh, is that really me? Yes. My imposter syndrome, as you said, Jane, because my business has, been quite successful this year. I'm going, oh, who is this person? What is this business? I suppose the culmination of all of that is, finding a mentor, investing in yourself, and finding a mentor that will support you in all of those things. Yeah. Whatever date that was, in July, June last year, changed my life. Yeah. Because I resonate with you. I trust, as I said, I'd been stalking you for a little while. I felt that even though you didn't know me, I felt like I sort of knew where you were coming from, and that worked for me. And so when I started working with you, it was the reinforcement. Okay, I trust Jane. You're very generous in terms of opening us up to your network and all of the ideas, to help steer me in the right direction. And I suppose that's the thing, whether it's comparisonitis, whether it's imposter syndrome, whether it's, oh, maybe I should try this, or maybe I should try that. Like, you're the person that just goes, all right, let's just come back to, I mean, we even had the conversation the other day, and this is exactly, you know, what I needed and what I loved is I said, I've just got this little idea about how many options I should give for my finance leadership team program. And you went, well, let's just come back to the value that you've committed to these potential clients. And let's just break that. Like, it came back down to the, all right, it's not the shallow, just sell the thing. What is the benefit that you're promising to give them if they come into that? And to me, like, it's just that credibility piece. It's I'm really comfortable when I'm selling programs for $20,000 a pop. I'm really comfortable that it's worth it. I'm really comfortable that I'm going to give them a very minimum of $20,000 of value back. Yes. And I think that, you know, I was talking to someone recently, and, you know, my new business manager, you know, is looking at this weird game that we play, Jane, and going, look at all these zeros. Like, this is ridiculous. It's not about the money. No. But what the money does allow us to do is be really generous and to solve big problems for people. Yes. And I think, you know what, if that's what it takes, then I'm so up for that. Yeah. And I'm so up for doing the work and creating the opportunities for my CFOs and also for my family. Yeah. Right. So that we can create this lifestyle that we want for ourselves.
Yeah, because you've moved from Sydney, you've moved to the Central Coast. If you get to follow Alena on social media, you'll see she puts up beautiful photos of the beach and a beautiful time. And I think that's really ultimately what it's all about, isn't it? Is I always think, you know, I ask the question each day is, am I living the dream? And if I'm living the dream, is like what's missing from the dream, or how good is the dream today? And I watch you and I go, there's so many women that have these aspirations of living that life of the design of how they want it to look, whether it goes, you know what, we don't need to live in the city, we can live in this place. You know, you're still running one of, you know, the signature program of your dreams. You've got hubby of your dreams, kids of your dreams, living the place of your dreams. You've got this incredible lifestyle. And I think that's particularly for women in consulting, that's the whole reason, is flexibility, freedom, have fun with what you're doing, and to have that impact. And if I think about what you've talked about today, Alena, I think it's, you know, you talk so much about intention and purpose, and I think about Simon Sinek's start with why. Everything's around start with why. But what I love about what you've done in particular is I think you also ask the question just as much, is it starts with who. Who do you care about? Who do you really, like, you care deeply about those clients that you have, you know them intimately. And I think if there's anything that we can learn from you and the trajectory that you've been on, and your practice has exploded over the last 12 months, is your obsession around solving those particular issues and problems, and just how deeply you're thinking about them all the time. So I really take my hat off to you, and I really want to acknowledge you for that. And thanks so much for jumping on today. If people want to if people want to reach out, people jumping out of closets and things in your house. If people want to get in touch with you, maybe they want to know a bit about the CFO boardroom, even if they just want to follow you and be inspired by you, as we all are, what would you like people to do?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn is a great place to start. You know, just follow me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty present on LinkedIn in terms of giving you an insight into what events I've got on and how we can connect. People are always willing to, you know, jump onto my website, alenabennett.com.au. They can even email me at alena@alenabennett.com.au. I'm just a normal human being. You know, I love to have a chat. I love to learn about people. So, you know, as I said, keep it easy, keep it simple, and let's have fun.
Oh, thank you again for being on, Ellen. You've been so generous with the insights and being able to delve into your practice. And hopefully we get to have you on again one day soon.
I hope so. Thanks, Jane. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.